Stop. Picture the most beautiful lie you've ever been told, then watch it rot. In 1834, the fastest way to get rich in America wasn't gold. It was planting one seed in Mississippi mud and owning the hands that planted the rest. Elias Davenport, 32, already had 3,000 of those hands, but he wanted 3,000 more without spending a cent. So he made a promise that sounded like scripture: "I will breathe strength into my stock, the way God breathes thunder into the sky." The people listening were barefoot, shirtless, and valued by the pound. They had no idea he meant their own daughters' wombs. Elias had 4 daughters: Rose, Pearl, Ivy, and May, each named after something that grows, something you can cut and sell. On the night of the first spring full moon, he marched the eldest 16-year-old Rose down the row of slave cabins and told her, "Pick the strongest man you see. Tomorrow you'll carry my future field hand." She thought it was a cruel joke until the joke wrapped its fingers around her throat and whispered, "Scream and I'll sell your mother by breakfast." Word spread through the quarters like kerosene. The master wasn't just working them, he was redesigning them. Pregnancies followed swollen bellies under torn dresses, each birth recorded in Elias's own handwriting as "New Crossbreed, Property of ED." Children arrived with too many fingers, spines curved like question marks, eyes the color of creek ice. The midwives called them moon calves and crossed themselves twice. Still, Elias smiled, counted extra knuckles as extra labor, and moved the next daughter into place. By 1837, Rose had 3 living crossbreeds, Pearl had 2, and the plantation's cotton yield had doubled on backs that hadn't cost a dime. Before we continue with the story of Fair Haven Plantation, if you're hearing this from anywhere in the United States, we'd love to know. Drop a comment telling us what state or city you're listening from. And if dark historical mysteries like this fascinate you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the truth we're about to uncover is something history tried very hard to forget. Every monster keeps receipts. Elias kept his in a red leather book small enough to hide inside a Bible cover. On the left page, dollar value of each bale. On the right, the name of the child who picked it, followed by a tiny sketch of the deformity that made the child unsellable yet perfectly mine. Page 47 reads, Ezekiel, age 6. Extra row of teeth chews twice as fast. Page 48, Clementine, age 4. Legs hinged backward, climbs stalks like a squirrel. He called these notes God's blueprints and bragged about them to neighboring planters over brandy, until one night a guest staggered home and vomited the story onto his wife's embroidery circle. Within a week, 3 churches prayed for Elias's soul. Within 2, cotton prices dipped and nobody cared about prayers anymore. But the red book grew fatter, and the cabins grew quieter, mothers swallowing screams so their infants wouldn't wake and inspire new experiments. Pearl, now 18, tried to hang herself with a plow line. Elias cut her down, stitched the rope burn with horsehair, and locked her in the smokehouse for 7 days, feeding her only the salt of her own tears. When he released her, she was pregnant again, this time by a man whose tongue he'd removed for singing freedom songs. The child arrived mute, with ears like seashells. Elias clapped and declared, "Finally, a worker who can't hear the lies I tell." Yet even monsters misplace math. The more deformities he bred, the more the fieldwork slowed. Claws snag on bowls, club feet trample seedlings, hair lips struggle to sip water. Profit margins wobbled, and for the first time Elias felt the ground under his boots soften, not with rain, but with whispered sabotage. Slaves started losing hose in the river, mixing powdered glass into the gin gears, teaching the crossbred toddlers to hide in the cane whenever the overseer's shadow rounded the corner. The red book still grew, but the left-hand numbers began shrinking, and Elias's smile lost a tooth for every dollar gone. Cora Mae was born in the quarters at 3 a.m. during a thunderclap so loud it cracked the baptismal trough. They said she entered the world laughing, which meant she already knew too much. By 12 she could turn a birthing breech with one hand and silence a screaming girl with the other. By 20 she carried a satchel of herbs that could start labor, stop a heart, or erase memory depending on how she mixed them. Elias summoned her to every delivery, threatening to sell her south if a single crossbreed died under her watch. So Cora Mae became the only soul who saw every child the moment it crowned, saw the extra vertebrae, the translucent eyelids, the second mouth that opened and closed like a fish gasping air. She recorded nothing, but she remembered everything. One September night, Rose's 4th labor stalled, the baby's shoulders wedged like a sideways axe. Cora Mae whispered into Rose's ear, Push once more, and I'll steal this child right out of your nightmare. Rose pushed. Cora Mae slit the umbilical cord with a cane knife, wrapped the infant in a feed sack, and smuggled it to the swamp while Elias counted money at the big house. She told him the baby was stillborn, let him watch her bury a hollowed-out log, then fed the living child to a family of runaways who raised it as Swamp Ghost, a creature no patroller ever caught. Word of Cora Mae's invisible rescues traveled on owl hoots. Mothers began bargaining 2 handfuls of raw cotton for a pinch of nightshade, a lullaby for a promise their baby would vanish before the master's appraisal. Over 7 years, 23 stillborns were buried as logs while 23 breaths grew up in the marsh, learning to walk on roots, speak in frog language, hate the name Davenport. But secrets are meat. If you chew too long, they sour. Elias noticed the graveyard never smelled like death, only sawdust. He dragged Cora Mae to the smokehouse, same as Pearl, and demanded the count. She spat herb juice in his eye, said, "I count the same way you count humanity, ain't none left." He raised the whip. She uncorked a vial, inhaled, and blew gray dust into his face. By morning, Elias could feel his heartbeat stutter. By dusk, he could no longer remember why cotton was worth more than bone. 1853. The Mississippi moon looked like a sliced throat. Inside Fair Haven, Elias thrashed in velvet sheets, veins on fire from whatever Cora Mae fed him. Outside, every crossbred child older than 10 received the same whisper, "Bring me 1 brick from the chimney you built. Tonight we close the oven." They came limping, crawling, rolling. Some carried bricks in mouths with 2 rows of teeth, others clutched them between toes bent backward. No speeches, just a single line marching to the drum of Elias's fevered screams. They circled the mansion, stacking bricks against every door, stuffing cotton stalks into window frames, pouring lamp oil like baptism. Pearl struck the first flint. The flames answered in a voice that sounded like every mother who ever swallowed a song. Fire licked up Corinthian columns, curled inside the library where the red ledger lay open on page 112. Projected stock, 500 deformities by 1860. Pages curled, numbers blackened, ink bled into smoke that spelled a single word across the sky: remember. Elias, half-blind, crawled onto the balcony, saw his creations glowing below, and for the first time recognized his own features twisted back at him, his jawline on a girl with no lips, his eyes on a boy with 2 pupils each. He tried to speak. Fire spoke louder. By sunrise the house was a kiln, bricks cracked like teeth too weak to chew the truth. No white body was found intact. Bones gleamed amid ashes, size too small to belong to a man who once measured people by the pound. Neighbors arrived, smelled the sweetness of burning cedar mixed with something metallic. History calls it justice. Newspapers called it unfortunate accident. The crossbred children vanished into the swamp where Cora Mae waited with a canoe and no questions. Fair Haven's land sat fallow for a decade, cotton replaced by kudzu that grew in shapes resembling extra fingers, hunched backs, open mouths. Travelers swear that on certain nights the vines twitch, spelling names no deed ever recorded. And somewhere downstream, descendants of Swamp Ghost still walk with a limp that matches the angle of a broken balcony, proof that deformities can be inheritance, but so is revolt. 1865. The war ended. Chains cracked. Reporters scoured the South for atrocities to print. Fair Haven never made the papers. The red ledger had burned, Cora Mae had disappeared, and the survivors had learned to smile without opening their mouths wide enough to show 2 rows of teeth. Yet blood remembers even when paper forgets. Census takers in 1870 noted a colored settlement deep in the Homichito swamp where children carried the same last name Davenport without the irony history expected. They farmed rice, caught catfish, sang hymns and harmonies that required 2 throats per note. Outsiders asked about their lineage. Elders replied, "We descend from a fire that learned to walk." Medical journals of 1901 record